All right, week 10 in the NFL, minutes from kicking off in Chicago, but to spare you from the potential eyesore of a Panthers-Bears matchup, especially early on, we're going to focus on the rest of the week 10 card with whale capper Drew Dinsick making his triumphant return to Props and Hops. A lot of you may know Drew as an NFL, NBA, and tennis handicapper, doing great work as an analyst with NBC Sports Bet, a stalwart on their Bet the Edge podcast, also the co-host of the acclaimed Deep Dive podcast, and a staple on the Matchbook NFL betting show. On the platform formerly known as Twitter, you can follow him if you're not doing so already at whale_capper. Drew, great to see you again. Welcome back to Props and Hops.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Matt. Great to reconnect, and congrats on the new Primes show. I'm excited to check those out. That's an exciting opportunity there, and yeah, great to see you again.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I feel so honored to be in very esteemed company there. And I'll probably sneak in a plug at some point in the middle of the show with a bit more info for the audience who may not have checked it out yet. But yeah, lots of fun stuff to look forward to. And as we get this show on the road, as always, want to note that for anybody who is live with us on YouTube or Twitter, feel free to chime in with any questions or comments, and we'll look to work that into the show when possible. And Drew, to kick things off here, we now have 9 weeks in the books. Now that we're working with an 18-week regular season, that's a pretty official halfway point. As we're at that midway point, how would you describe some of your top takeaways so far this season from a betting perspective?
Oof. Well, unders. I hope you like unders. I hope you like ugly football. I hope you like ugly primetime football. It's been a slog to start the season, and I think most of kind of the people who are care about the sport and who are specifically trying to craft a model that comes up with a realistic score and total like have been racking their brains as to what's underlying reason. What are the underlying reasons here? I've kind of settled on a bunch of rookie quarterbacks, bunch of second-year quarterbacks who stink, bunch of offensive coordinator hires who have been whiffs. There's just very few success stories as you look across the league in the new faces and new places. And I think that is kind of mostly to kind of blame here. And there's nothing else about the scoring environment on a macro sense that I think you really need to be capturing. It's pretty clear that the Fangio style of defense that really took over and the wave that swept over the NFL in terms of the deployment of safeties deep down the field and really trying to prevent the home run play. Now that's been adopted by everyone effectively. Everyone can run that now. And the teams that really leaned in that direction have even gone further and kind of populated their secondaries with guys who are capable of running those systems while also being outstanding run fit. And that's just made it that much more difficult for teams to succeed in terms of explosive plays. And it's made it that much more difficult for teams to succeed in the red zone. And I think that's just the world we live in now. And until we get, the new crop of game breaking quarterbacks into their prime, like the Lawrences and the Strouds of the world, then I think this is just where we live.
And it sounds like based on that description, you're seeing a lot of chaos in the world we're living in now. But as I've said over the years on this show, chaos breeds opportunity. And Drew, it seems like you've been making the most of that opportunity thus far this season. And we'll look to keep that rolling as we enter the second half. And as we do that, to kick things off from a betting standpoint, this week on the week 10 card, it seems like it's pretty tight as far as sides and totals go from what I can see. But from your standpoint, what would you say is your favorite side on the week 10 board right now?
Yeah, I would split it right now at current prices between Cincinnati and Baltimore. These are two legit teams. These are two big boy teams, and there are some pretty obvious matchup advantages for these two home favorites. I'll make the case for Baltimore first, which is that's a bet I made earlier in the week. Only early week bet I made this week that I still feel like confident now that I've digested some more of the injury reports and I've watched some of the games a couple times. It is pretty clear to me, at least, that Deshaun Watson is still dealing with meaningful injury to his shoulder. That's impacting his ability to operate at the quarterback position, despite the fact that you can kind of highlight a handful of throws in the game against the Cardinals. the bad Watson stuff was there. The indecision in the pocket, the holding onto the ball too long, the waiting too long to scramble when they were clear running lanes, and just a propensity to dump off the football instead of look in the intermediate range. And when he did go deep, Amari Cooper was able to create separation and win 1v1 against a Cardinals defense that I felt quit a little bit. And I just don't see any of those kind of hallmarks being successful against a defensive coordinator and Mike McDonald, who is absolutely in his bag right now. He's calling the most effective defense that I've seen in a while. And really since the Ravens traded for Roquan Smith middle of the last year, they've been number one with a bullet in terms of defensive efficiency. And it's just a really, really healthy team. The offensive side of the ball is at full strength right now. You have an offensive line that is winning their battles in the trenches, which can, in my opinion, abate some of the pass rush from the front four of the Browns. And if you're giving Lamar Jackson time against this Browns secondary, I think, they can make this look pretty comfortable win here. So I make this one outside of 7. I think anything inside of 7 between now and when we kick this game off is a bet for me on the Ravens. And, I think Ravens pretty clearly a class above, the Browns in all regards, and, should, at least for now, be expected to kind of land one of the coveted 1 or 2 seeds in the AFC. So it's a team to watch for sure. I know a lot of people have already caught on to this and kind of putting them at the top of their power rankings, putting Lamar at the top of the MVP discussion. I'm not there, but I do think against this matchup with the Browns, you're in pretty good shape to really put a hurting on this team.
And it seems like the Bengals are another team that people have really been moving on up in recent weeks. It sounds like you might be looking their way as well. I know that line had been teetering around the 7. Looks like a pretty consistent 6.5 across the board right now. Even a cheap minus 6.5 for Cincinnati at one of the sharper market making offshores. But Drew, what's your case for the Bengals in this week's matchup against Houston, especially given the health questions around their wide receiving core?
Yeah, really interesting market. Opened up 7.5. I think the early enthusiasm for Houston was just people who were still living the euphoria of watching CJ Stroud go for 505 touchdowns or whatever his numbers were against the Buccaneers. And that was a masterful performance. I don't want to take anything away from him. I'm excited that we have another good young quarterback in the NFL, and I wish him all the success in the world. But this is a different animal. Like if you look at sort of the home road splits for CJ Stroud this year, definitely more comfortable at home, definitely more comfortable against defenses that are a little bit one note like the Bucs. When he's gone up against defenses that have multiple ways to really kind of throw you some misdirection, some confusion, and really kind of make it harder for you to process exactly what the right decision is at the quarterback position. He's a young quarterback. He's struggling at that. That's not crazy. Like, I feel like this is basically rerun of week 1 where he was up against Mike McDonald and the Ravens. And I know that the quality of players on the field for the Bengals are not close to the Ravens' quality of players, but I have an enormous amount of respect for Lou Anarumo. You mix into the fact that the Bengals are playing better defensively. This is a team that held the mighty Buffalo Bills to 18 points last week, and Josh Allen to a neutral EPA per pass, which is pretty impressive. And if you can do that to Josh Allen, you can definitely keep. I think you can put CJ Stroud into a box. Texans are dealing with a bunch of injuries themselves, and honestly, the way that Burrow is playing right now, I may regret saying this, but I kind of don't care about the availability of the wide receivers. If it's Boyd and wide receiver 4 and 5 and tight end 1 and 2 out there, that's fine. I mean, Burrow is playing magnificently well. And what's funny is people were like, why isn't he playing as well? The calf injury, blah, blah, blah. His mechanics were off. He was truly, just a very different quarterback at the beginning of the season. And I think people kind of expected him to get up to, some average level that they remember from last year. And honestly think that as we get through the rest of this year, you'll see him exceed some of the, numbers that he was able to put up last year, because he's continuing to improve better. He's getting better at reading defenses. He's learning what other ways to beat you. In fact, the injury kind of forced him to learn about, kind of specifically within himself, what else can I do to make this offense succeed if I can't, hit home run balls to Jamar Chase. Well, now that his entire tool set is back and he's got, he's learned through this, and I think it's just very impressive what he's able to do to avoid pressure, what he's able to do on the ground. All of that looks like new awesome stuff in the arsenal for him. So even if it's Trenton Irwin and Andre Iosivas opposite Tyler Boyd out there when they're in 11, I just believe in Burrow to get something going here. So mostly expecting the Bengals defense to keep CJ Stroud frustrated, and I think Bengals can get into the 20s here. So something like a 24-7, or 27-10 type of win would be my most realistic expectation there. But again, anything under 7 for me is a bet on the Bengals.
And we've got a point in the chat on Twitter from Stephen Murren noting this is a sandwich game for Cincinnati. Obviously, the big Sunday nighter against Buffalo this past week, and then a quick turnaround to Thursday night in Baltimore. I've come over the years to think that spots like this are by and large priced into the market. So I'm not sure that there's much of an edge to be had either way based on this individual factor. But I don't take it lightly that, yeah, this is a sandwich spot for Cincinnati for what it's worth. Drew, how do you value that when it comes to the point spread? And do you think the market properly accounts for that these days?
I think it's guesswork as more than it is pricing it correctly, right? If you're saying this is a sandwich spot for a team, what you mean is I'm going to guess that they're going to put away the good plays, that they're just going to try to get out of here with an easy win, right? Like with a 3-point win and a 7-point win, it doesn't matter to Cincinnati. They're just going to, just do what they have to do to win and get out of there. I think the Saints were guilty of that type of performance last week, where they very, very much did not have defensive intensity in the first half against Tyson Bagent. Bagent and the Bears rolling out all this run attack that you hadn't seen in their arsenal at all in his time as a starter. And the Saints were kind of caught flat-footed by it and didn't adjust till halftime. Almost cost them that game, right? Like there for sure are motivational letdown games for teams. And if you want to say, I'm going to guess this is one of those because next Thursday really matters, well, that's fine. But the Bengals don't have any kind of latitude to, fiddle around here. Like their backs are against the wall. Any kind of additional losses, and they're thinking wild card at best, as opposed to still being able to control some of their own destiny in the AFC North. So I really don't. I don't know that a team that's as it's got veterans on it that's as well coached as the Bengals, or same with the Ravens. Like I don't think either of those teams is really assuming that they'll get wins this week and really thinking about Thursday night yet. I mean, these are veteran teams and professionals, and that they're playing teams. Both of them are playing teams with a pulse, and they know it. Right. This isn't the Cardinals. This isn't the Bears. This isn't the Giants or, the Patriots. Like these teams can beat you. And I think we have both teams coming off of impressive wins. I mean, the Texans win was a comeback impressive win as opposed to a blowout. The Browns just blew out the Cardinals. So, I mean, it's not like I don't think you can really look past either of these guys. And so as far as like, am I worried or back of my head even, thinking, boy, I hope Baltimore and Cincinnati show up on Sunday. I'm not. I think this is pretty meaningful football for both of these teams that have aspirations of Super Bowl this year.
And I will certainly be hoping that Baltimore shows up as well. I thought we might have some overlap here. I'm glad you went with 2 games. So my side breakdown here is not a carbon copy of your analysis, but I too like Baltimore best of all the sides on the board right now at -6.5 hosting Cleveland. And I always feel compelled to acknowledge that, yes, this was at -6 for much of the week. The perils of doing a show live on Thursday night. The best of the number is most likely gone, but that doesn't mean that we've missed a bettable number altogether. So maybe bringing the wager amount down just a touch to account for this. But to your point, anything under a touchdown being a go. I know you broke this down very well just minutes ago, also on the Matchbook NFL show and the Deep Dive podcasts earlier this week. Hitman on Forward Progress. I know his best bets on that show have been brutal, but I feel like he's due for some positive regression. And also Sharp Clark making a good case for Baltimore on the Move the Line podcast. So a lot of people whom I highly respect making some very salient points in my book. I will just sum it up by saying that the Baltimore offense really seems to be finding its footing halfway into a season, running a new system. The defense got to be one of the biggest stories of the league so far this season. The talent did not appear to be all that elite on paper, but they are really getting the job done. And it seems like it could be accomplished in a sustainable way moving forward. And on the Brown side of things, no qualms with their defense, but I think in the current NFL offense being more important than defense, the Cleveland offense seems like it's still getting priced a good bit too high with Deshaun Watson in his current state. So all things considered, I know the Browns can look like a bully against pretty downtrodden teams, as we just saw against Arizona. They didn't do too much impressive in that one. I think the Ravens have been incredibly impressive lately, and there's been a lot of signal to it. So count me in as well on Baltimore -6.5 hosting Cleveland.
Yeah, I can add one other thing, though, on the Browns defense that I can't explain. And you tell me if you have a theory, but the Browns defense home road splits are a little bit eyebrow raising. This is a team that is putting up historic, near impossible numbers at home, and then they go on the road and they give up just absurd yard per play EPA to Gardner Minshew, right? Like there's a little bit of a way. Are you benefiting from the home crowd environment? The opposing offensive line being a little slow off the snap. Like, is that communication for the other team? Like, I definitely wonder if those are factors that are helping the Browns kind of in general tilt their statistical profile a little bit, because at home they look unbeatable, and on the road there have been pretty weak offenses that have put a beating on them. So definitely something worth watching.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that yet. And my first reaction is half a season is no kind of sample size to draw really extreme conclusions. However, I also think even though it's been the first half of the season, we haven't really hit the winter months yet. There have been a few games in Cleveland where, as we see a few times a year, the weather can really play a factor.
Sure.
That Niners game was pretty sloppy, might have contributed to San Francisco not only dealing with injuries mid-game, but also really slowing down offensively. And I think sometimes the elements can really work in their favor as a defense at home. And Baltimore, a little bit more mild of a climate. I'm not super up to speed on the forecast for this Sunday's matchup, but I think that part of it might be when Cleveland's at home, not just the quality of their unit or what the crowd might bring to the table, but some of the elements maybe not as much of a factor in a lot of the road venues they're traveling to, especially early on in the season before we hit those harsher winter months.
Yeah, that all checks out to me. And just for context, they have I was just going to try to pull it up, but I forgot to single out just 2023. So it pulled up all of Brown's history. But yeah, in the 3 road games this season, you're giving up 6.8, 6.6, 4.8 yards per play. That includes Indy, Seattle, Pittsburgh. Not necessarily offenses that I consider top tier in the NFL. And then at home, we have 1.2 against the Cardinals last week, 2.0, 2.6, 3.9, 5.4. It's pretty clear, at least, that the splits home road in terms of yard. If you're giving up 6 yards per play on the road and 3 at home, like that's wild. That's a really aggressive delta there. And I don't know, it probably is some small sample size, sure, but I will be watching that for the rest of the season without a doubt.
Yeah, while it may be small sample with a delta that big, there's a non-zero chance that there's something. I almost draw a parallel to Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. I don't know what he's doing, and that sample size is big enough over the course of his tenure, but there's something there that we can't quantify, and it's time to stop ignoring it. I think the market might have already gotten to that point this week with the Steelers laying north of a field goal against the Packers, but glad that we were able to look at some non-Steelers sides this week. And Drew, I'm really glad that you brought it with a couple of sides, because usually this next segment, the teasers, is where I feel like I tend to bring some good value with my selection process to the show. It's been a choppy past couple weeks, a really good start to the season overall, but this is looking like a paltry teaser card on the Week 10 slate. Typically, I default to looking for teams that you can cross through 3 and 7 on that classic NFL 2-team 6-point teaser, laying no more than -120, which sadly cannot be found throughout Nevada these days, but faraway places, much better option if you can shop around for some strong plus EV teasers. This week, I only see 3 fits looking at the classic model. New England can be taken up to +8 against the Colts in Germany early Sunday morning. Arizona can be taken up to +8 hosting Atlanta. and then Buffalo can be taken down to -1.5 hosting Denver. So, Drew, not a ton to work with. And even though there are only 3 fits, I also think there are not necessarily 3 high quality fits in terms of what we've seen through the first half of the season. Are you playing any teasers this week? Or if you were to play a teaser, is there one that would stand out to you as the best selection on this week 10 card?
If those are the only prices you're working with, I would skip teasers this week. If you can find Tennessee plus 1.5 somewhere, that one works for me. I like Tennessee out past 7 if you can get it out past 7. And I would put that with New England. New England, Tennessee would be the only teaser I would play. But if you're only taking it out to 7 and not 7.5, there's a pretty noteworthy difference. The 7 push probability is huge. So you're losing a decent amount of your value there. So I don't like teasing Arizona just because the injury situation around Kyler Murray's return is just really, really hard to price. I mean, the uncertainty bands around what that offense is going to be able to do. Number one, not knowing what Kyler Murray is bringing to the table. And number two, not knowing how he's going to play behind a team that's missing potentially 3 starters on the offensive line and their top 2 running backs. It's a really, really tough situation for Murray, and that defense has been beaten up or gotten beaten pretty badly on the ground, which is not a good recipe for going up against an Art Smith team. So Arizona is a pretty clear cross off, and honestly, I have Buffalo on upset alert. This defense it's been ravaged by injury, and it's gotten worse. You don't know if you've seen the practice reports, but no Micah Hyde, no Poyer in practice today. And I know it's early. There's a lot of time left. It's a Monday night game. That's all you got left. Like, this is really getting suspect. They're down to practice squad players at key positions in that in the linebacking core. And honestly, it's I don't know that Josh Allen's capable of really moving the needle enough to warrant being 7.5 point favorites against the Broncos. So Broncos, I think, are a decent bet this week in the blind, but certainly not interested in kind of being in exactly the same spot you're in with Buffalo against New England, where it's just like they're decimated. You could make a bad offense look good.
I appreciate that you brought up Tennessee to think outside the box a bit, not just looking at the teams that fit the model with numbers that are painted across the board. And for those who can shop around, Tennessee, I'm seeing it, ironically, one of the more prominent books in Nevada, a plus 1.5. So shop around at a place that has that number plus the right teaser price point, and there you go. But Drew, if people are looking at Tennessee plus 1, of course, we wouldn't want to stop at 7 on a teaser. So maybe pay the extra 10 cents that most books would charge to make this a 6.5 point teaser. At that point, I don't see a lot of great 6.5 point teaser fits. But if somebody really liked Tennessee to keep it close in Tampa Bay, one thing I've been looking at more often lately is juicy 3-point favorites. You can take them through the other 3 to plus 3.5 on a 6-point teaser. And I'm looking at teams like Pittsburgh right now is a soft minus 3.5, or there are some heavily juiced minus 3s. San Francisco now is a juicy minus 3, shaded toward 3.5 at circa. So if we have some pretty firm 3-point favorites and you can get plus 3.5 in the 6.5 point teaser, knowing that teasers neutralize the VIG. So whether we're looking at a minus 3 flat or a minus 3 minus 125, the teaser is going to cost you the same price. If we're looking at 6.5 point teasers to lock in something for Tennessee, would you have any interest in paying minus 130 for a 6.5 point teaser, pairing Tennessee with either the Niners or the Steelers, going through 3 kind of twice up to plus 3.5?
I would have to take a look at what the buy price is for that bet in particular to know if it was, that there's value there. I kind of like the Niners anyway, if we're being honest. Like, I don't mind laying 3.5. So I think Niners would be, perfectly reasonable to try to think through that one a little bit. Definitely don't see that game as a game that, in terms of game states, in terms of likely outcomes, the tail for Jags winning by margin, I think, is pretty narrow. That's not a fat tail. And so you're not really going to be sweating, I don't think, a runaway here for the Jags. But I do think that one's going to be a higher scoring game than the market thinks. I know there may be some weather factors influencing some of the total betting there, but I make that one over 47. by my fare. So evident, it's one of the higher scoring games of the week for me, and for those reasons, I tend to avoid those in teasers as well. So I think probably a good week to just you know what, it's a teaser bye week.
That's a pretty good way to put it, because usually I'll talk about my process of elimination in previous weeks of the season. It seems like it's been an exercise in getting from 8 decent teaser fits down to 2. Here, I wouldn't mind discarding every option. The Patriots have been so uninspiring, and the Colts are a high variance team under Gardner Minshew, and high variance
Truly.
is not exactly something you look for in teasers, which are inherently bets against variance. You touched on Arizona, Kyler Murray coming back off the injury. How's that going to look? Buffalo trying to support them these days feels like it's trying to catch a falling knife. So I haven't pulled the trigger on any teasers yet, and usually have something good geared up for the show. I like the notion of a teaser bye week right about now, though. If somebody was really itching to place a bet, I'd say, maybe to quote Dave Malinsky, some pizza money. I would look toward Arizona and Buffalo if I had to play one. So a lot of times in the betting content space, there's accusation of shows just becoming an echo chamber, everybody agreeing with everybody. We've got some diversity of thought here, because you were pretty quick to rule out both Arizona and Buffalo.
Yeah.
I totally get why. That's why this would be a very small bet, if anything, that I could endorse. I will say, when it comes to Kyler Murray making his return, it seems to me like a bit of an atypical return from injury, and that he's been practicing for quite some time. I wouldn't be surprised if he looks a good bit closer to 100% than most players coming back from injury. And also the opponent here, not just trying to play Arizona, but a chance to possibly fade an Atlanta team that has given me zero reason to believe that they're in shape to blow out anyone in the NFL these days, especially when they go out on the road. So Arizona, if I squint hard enough, I can see somebody trying to justify it. And then when it comes to Buffalo, as you said, the Bills are struggling. Denver seems to be trending up as we hit the second half of the season. But in that case, it's just a classic spot where I see still a clearly superior team at home being asked to do little more than win outright. So no ringing endorsements for teasers this week, but hopefully some good food for thought. And if we're going to make it a teaser bye week, then let's try to see if there's any value we can uncover when it comes to the props, putting the props and hops. Drew, is there anything that stands out to you from a prop betting standpoint on this week 10 slate?
I'll be perfectly candid with you. I'm not a prop originator. I'm not a prop better in general. Just it's not never really squared with my approach. But I will tell you there are a couple of wide receiver opinions I have this week that I'm going to shop around on. I think it's pretty clear that we're developing like some hardcore chemistry here between Kenny Pickens and Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is playing like a top 10 wide receiver right now. His numbers, I don't think, have caught up to his contributions to that offense. And I like him going up against Jair Alexander, who's, man, there were a couple of freaking downs where Cooper Kupp beat him like a drum before Kupp ultimately just sort of looked like he picked up some kind of injury. And Jair Alexander missing practice this week. I think there's a decent chance that is a lopsided matchup in favor of the Steeler. And then similarly, I like the Brandon Ayuk number is going to be pretty low against Jaguars, who are bringing back Tyson Campbell. Likely gets matched up mostly against Tyson Campbell. I think the Darius Williams has been the better of the two cornerbacks for the Jags so far this year. So the chemistry between Purdy and Ayuk also undeniable, and that may be a little bit a little cold water thrown on that number just because of the availability of Deebo Samuel here. So I think you can maybe get a little bit of a contrarian over on Ayuk, and then fade all the I'm interested in fading all of the Texans wide receiving core. They thrived against a secondary that was injured last week for the Buccaneers. Now they got to go up against Lou Anarumo, who is very, very good at taking away the home run play. CJ Stroud operating specifically over the middle of the field with Lou kind of specifically spelling out where he wants him to dictate. I think that spells trouble for those guys getting any kind of yak. Nico Collins dealing with injuries as well, so happy to go under on Nico this week.
I am looking at it. Looks like receiving props, especially for the Texans, are pretty sparsely populated right now. Maybe the market just,
So
or at
many
least the books,
injuries,
trying to get a handle on the injury situation.
Yeah.
I'm seeing Nico Collins at 59.5. Also seeing Tank Dell. You didn't mention his name, but I know he's been all the rage from that Texans wide receiver core so far this season. He's lined at 44.5 at one book, so not a ton of availability yet.
You know
but
what?
if we can
Maybe we
look
just
for
go
Collins,
CJ Stroud passing yards under then. Yeah. That way you don't have to worry about who ultimately gets the role of responsibilities. If that's in like the 250 to 260 range, I think that's a decent under.
Got it. Yeah, I am seeing some 251.5 is the highest I'm seeing, and a lot of 249.5 seems to be the prevailing number there.
Sounds fair. I that sounds like what I would have expected, and I like that under.
All right, so we'll put you down for CJ Stroud under 249.5 as a widely available number. Shop around and you can probably get a couple of yards of wiggle room on that. And you mentioned for the wide receivers, Drew, that you would be shopping around. Looks like consensus right now for Deontay Johnson, 62.5 yards, and Brandon Ayuk, 64.5 yards. How do those sound as you talked about leaning toward the over, if not strongly liking the over for those two guys?
Yeah, I just lean over on those two. I think they're gonna hit 70 to 100. But those are pretty good numbers.
Got it. Okay, so it seems like some pretty firm leans on Johnson and Ayuk to the over, and CJ Stroud, maybe more conviction on under 249.5 passing yards. I'm going to stick with you in terms of wide receiver props this week, and this one feels like a little bit of the classic plug your nose walking up to the window. I might feel like a complete moron come Sunday afternoon. But right now, I am struggling to talk myself out of Quentin Johnston over 30.5 receiving yards. And for starters, I will acknowledge that he has been alarmingly absent from this offense, especially since Mike Williams went down. He seems to be too raw at this stage to be a consistent contributor. And it was a bad look for the Chargers to draft him right before Flowers and Addison, the way that those three have performed so far this season. But with Mike Williams out for the season, with Josh Palmer now on IR, Johnson's pretty much in the number 2 wide receiver role out of necessity for this Chargers offense. And last week was our first look at him in that prominent of a spot. And he was often covered by Sauce Gardner as a result. This Lions defense seems quite improved this year, but I don't think their secondary has much of a match for what Sauce brings to the table. And also last week when Johnson was in this role for the first time, the Chargers were leading by margin for pretty much the entire game, not by anything special from their offense, but special teams, a punt return for a touchdown, the defense often setting up the offense with short fields. So the Chargers really had no need to force the passing game, especially against a good pass defense. This week, I can say that I really agree with the Lions money that's entered the market so far. If that line were still Detroit -2.5, that would have been my favorite side for this week 10 slate. So I think there's a decent likelihood that the Chargers could be trailing in this one, much unlike their game state on Monday night against the Jets. The Lions, as a result, could be willing to concede a decent bit of moderate gains in order to prevent the big one. So that's my handicap. A little queasy saying it, but Quentin Johnston over 30.5 receiving yards. Drew, any thought as far as that goes? I believe you've gone on record elsewhere saying you like the Lions. So perhaps game script, if nothing else, and Johnston's role out of necessity, given some injuries, could open up some opportunity here. Or am I just crazy for trying to back him when we haven't seen it yet?
I completely understand where you're going, where your angle is. Like that's a very sound handicap. You're basically saying this is kind of the exact recipe for Quentin to break out. But for me, I'd be like, this is kind of now or never, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. You want to if that's kind of your if you feel like there is upside there, if you've seen something, then go for it. But I just find it pretty amazing that Addison was able to step into a wide receiver 1 role when he was asked, and Quentin Johnson can't step into the wide receiver 3 role. That's amazing.
Yeah, definitely a bit uneasy. And to your point, it's early to say now or never for a rookie receiver, but especially if we're looking to back somebody to the over in the prop betting market, this is the time. It's put up or shut up. So we'll see how that goes, but put me down for Quentin Johnston over 30.5 receiving yards. And at this point of the show, I would like to give everybody the weekly reminder that I am partnering with the team over at Right Angle Sports in an affiliate capacity this season. A big part of the reason for doing so is that betting is a lot of fun, but winning can be awfully tough at times. And I try to make sure that my value proposition with this show focuses on highlighting the best information from the sharpest sources. And with a team of pro sports bettors, Right Angle Sports has built a reputation as the gold standard for picks. I think they've got something for everybody, whether you want to check out what they offer for the NFL or their college basketball service. that's kind of their flagship. And with the season tipping off, could be a good time to check that out. If you're interested in seeing what Right Angle has to offer, you can support this show by supporting Right Angle Sports via a custom link that I've built, tinyurl.com/raspicks. If you're with us on YouTube or in podcast form, that link is in the show notes. And on Twitter, you can find that link in the bio. And one more plug, swinging back to something that Drew mentioned off the top of the show here, I would like to let everybody know some exciting news that I'm hosting a new podcast called Prime Suspects. This is a weekly show bringing you an insider's look behind the counter of a new sports book, Prime Sports. And I'm in insanely esteemed company here with a couple of the guys behind Prime Sports. Joe Brennan Jr. played a pivotal role in getting PASPA overturned, so we are all indebted to him for that. And he's in the Sports Betting Hall of Fame. And Adam Bjorn, also on the show, I remember being captivated by his appearance on a panel at Bet Bash 2. And beyond Bet Bash, he has worked in the gaming industry for almost his entire adult life, all over the world, has some legendary experience on both sides of the counter. So if anybody is listening to this and considers themselves a fan of the old school approach with fair, transparent limits, honest bookmaking, all bettors are welcome at Prime Sports, and I think you'll be a fan of Prime Suspects if you're enjoying this show, so feel free to check it out wherever you get your podcasts. All right, commercial break is over. Drew, we'll get back to business here. I will run down a rapid-fire recap of picks we've discussed so far that we can consider the Props and Hops Week 10 portfolio. Sides, Drew brought two of them. Baltimore -6.5 hosting Cleveland, plus Cincinnati -6.5 hosting Houston. I'm with Drew, seeing eye to eye on the Ravens. As far as teasers go, let's call it the teaser bye week. But if you must, pizza money at most. Drew would identify Tennessee up to plus 7.5 at Tampa Bay. Shop around to get Tennessee up through the 7 to 7.5, and consider pairing that with New England +8 against the Colts in Germany. And I'm going to throw out Arizona +8 hosting Atlanta, paired with Buffalo -1.5 hosting Denver. A little more conviction on props, thankfully. Drew feeling the most conviction on CJ Stroud under 249.5 passing yards, and also some pretty strong leans on Deontay Johnson over 62.5 receiving yards and Brandon Ayuk over 64.5 receiving yards. And for those with the intestinal fortitude, may I also suggest Quentin Johnston. I don't know if he has 30 receiving yards all season, but this Sunday
he had
against
a
the
50-yarder.
Lions.
Yeah, he had a 50-yard game.
Oh, there we go. Okay, then let's double down on this. Not really, but a bit more confidence there. Quentin Johnston over 30.5 receiving yards for the Chargers on Sunday hosting Detroit. Drew, a lot of good stuff when it comes to picks for the NFL Week 10 slate. I also always try to weave in some process here to leave the audience with some evergreen takeaways. And whenever I connect with you, I'm always fascinated by the dynamic of trying to balance how to allocate finite bandwidth toward betting and how much to put toward content. It seems like the betting market continues to evolve and get sharper, and the content landscape also continuing to grow in the post-PASPA era. So how do you approach trying to allocate your time optimally between the betting and content sides of things?
I have been doing this for too long, apparently, because there is no real challenge anymore. The two are intertwined to the point where the content is part of the process as much as the originating. Like just the act of kind of figuring out how to put into words, exactly why I think there is an edge, why, that there is lots of reasons to make a bet. Your median for a team and is higher than the market. Your median for their opponent is lower than the market. The median outcome is different than the market price. You make the bet. You think this team has the opportunity to perform above their median because of some reason. You think there's a fat tail because of the matchup for some reason. Like there are lots of ways to kind of take a quantitative approach to coming up with fares, and then find ways to put it into words for people who want to consume content. And I've learned through reps, I guess, that if I can't say it out loud without it sounding stupid, then I'm probably making some kind of mistake in my process in and of itself. So at this point, I'm sure I could figure out a way to, go through the process of coming up with plays and getting down and enjoying football if I was completely divorced from doing any kind of content. But I would take an adjustment, because right now the two go hand in hand pretty much perfectly. And, when we got started doing the deep dive a million freaking years ago, that was the first thing that became obvious, which was, yeah, I bet this team because of this reason. And then as soon as you say it, you're like, wow, that was a dumb bet. And then going into it, and you're like, get to game day, and you're like, well, I got negative closing line value. I don't know why. I guess this is a coin flip. Well, I won or lost the coin flip. Doesn't feel great. And just in general, kind of, realizing that, there's certainly mental, there are cognitive biases that affect a lot of your decision making, and, saying it out loud why you're doing what you're doing has helped me really overcome some of that.
I love that answer because it just makes for a more efficient overall process, almost killing two birds with one stone and not taking necessarily a whole bunch of shortcuts to get there. And Drew, I would imagine that taking that approach with the NFL, among other sports, might also be why you can find the value that you do in markets like the NBA and in tennis as well. And I like to focus on the NBA for just a moment, with the season fairly recently tipping off, and as we're in the middle of the end season tournament for the first time, a lot of recreational bettors might be looking for early season NBA edges, maybe not as well versed as you are, as experienced with the betting market, but wanting to do something more than flip coins, to your point earlier. Any advice for recreational bettors on how to best attack the NBA market?
Without question, there is one thing. If you are a recreational player, if you are having trouble, if you don't even go through the process of coming up with a fair, you are in deep trouble betting the NBA. Just, you need to recognize that. The entirety of the NBA revolves around numbers. You don't need to watch games like you do in the NFL, in my opinion. You don't need to watch tennis and see player performance and understand who's, nursing an injury, sick, exhausted, whatever. Like, you literally just need to have a numerical process in order to come up with fair prices. In that spirit, the most important first step for a recreational player is to come up with some understanding of what market fair is for a team. And we now have enough games in the season that you can take all the closing prices for all of the games we've got so far, and you can basically solve for what is the markets think the fair price for offense and efficiency, defensive efficiency, total net rating for a given team should be. You can pull those actual data from Basketball Reference with one click, and you can compare the two, and you can try to figure out, well, wow, that's weird. The market says this is a good defense, but their defensive rating is poor. Like, okay, clearly the market is expecting some regression there, right? Clearly, like, this single number sticks out, like huge error on this one relative to what the market rating says. What was going on in that game? A key player wasn't playing. Draymond Green was out. Oh, that's why, right? Like, there's the beginning to unlocking the answer key to numbers in the NBA is understanding market fairs. So take the closing spreads and totals for all of the games we've got this season, deconvolve those into what the market thinks those teams are worth, and that has to be your starting point, in my opinion.
All right. I love the clarity to that answer. It does require a bit of a grind, but that's how you can get beyond just purely flipping coins. So, without getting to the super advanced professional level, a really good first step there from Drew. And Drew, when you're not grinding away on the betting boards, a good way to unwind and enjoy other aspects of life gives us the opportunity to weave in the hops right here. And recently, I was pumped to get a text from you with a photo from one of my favorite spots in the world, my favorite brewery, Green Cheek Beer Company, and you were at my favorite location of theirs, Sunset Beach, just down the road from you in LA's South Bay, making the trek to, I think that one's firmly in Orange County, just about where Huntington Beach and Long Beach come together. So from your Green Cheek Sunset Beach location, Drew, I'd love to hear any takeaways you've got, any standouts from the beer to the food to the ocean view. How would you describe that overall experience?
It was incredible. Already ready to go back. Really cool place. They're doing an amazing job of kind of expanding the, kind of local, beer scene in Orange County and in our neighborhood. We rode our e-bikes there, and spent the whole day there. The entire parking lot was just e-bikes from one side to the other. And place was packed, great vibe, family friendly, dog friendly. The beers at Green Cheek were, I would say, top 5 in Southern California, maybe top 3. The one that really stood out for me that I was kind of caught by surprise was the Skeleton Wings. It was a DDH West Coast IPA, Amarillo Mosaic and Nelson hops, double dry hopped. If you don't know what DDH is, West Coast IPA. It was 7.2 alcohol by volume, and it was kind of the perfect. I'm a gin and tonic kind of liquor drinker, and it really kind of captured a lot of the same kind of pine and juniper type of notes in a beer, and I was kind of totally shocked by that. Loved it. High recommendation for Green Cheek Beer Company, and you get to sit there on the balcony and you get to watch the ocean, and on a sunny day, which we get plenty of here in the fall, it was a can't beat experience.
I love it. I'm usually the one championing Green Cheek on the show, but you came ready to.
I wouldn't have heard of them
share
if you
all the
didn't give me a
highlights.
Green Cheek when we met, when we hung out that time at the Super Bowl. You were like, "Hey, here's a 4-pack of my favorites," and Green Cheek was one of them. And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! I got to look out there, that Green Cheek." And then I went by it, and I did a double take. I was like, "What?" I was like, "There's one here," and yeah, Sunset Beach. Check it out.
Yeah, and I think what may have really won you over is that one of the beers I gave you happened to be called Swim Test. So for those
Yes.
familiar with Drew's background, that's just, a case of good beer plus a good name, maybe a case of 1 + 1 = 3.
Exactly.
All right. Well, it was, great to meet up before the Super Bowl a bit back. We'll have to reconnect again in person and make Green Cheek Sunset Beach the location. But Drew, before we can make those plans and close up shop, one more thing to weave into the show, the Malinsky Minute as a nod to the late, great David Malinsky. And as much as he could really buckle down and commit to the grind when it was necessary, I think one thing that I try to emulate most from having known him is also embracing when it's the right time to get off the grid, as he would put it. And last Friday, I was in Las Vegas, and it was a Vegas experience unlike any other that I've ever had. Took a 12-mile hike. It was Grand Circle Loop, a really nice trail in Red Rock Canyon. And it sounds like this weekend, Drew, you've got your own desert getaway plans. Anything in store as far as your next few days being quote unquote off the grid?
Yeah, man. It's officially the start of the high desert season. Anyone from Southern California probably has fond memories of making winter trips out to Joshua Tree, Palm Springs, Palm Desert, all amazing, areas. Yucca Valley in general is just a super, super fun time. It's unlike anything I've seen visually, and there's quite a lot of fun stuff to do. The national park, Joshua Tree itself, has endless amounts of rock climbing and hiking. I'm looking forward to a couple of days out there to get some sun and spend some time at the in the high desert. And I think in general, like getting away from your screen and for me as a NFL bettor, first and foremost, this time of year, like Friday, Saturday, those are the days that I am happy to divorce myself from watching sports, and to combine that with a little bit of the adventuring outdoors is going to be pretty amazing. So I can't wait.
That sounds too good for me to put off any farther for you. I'll let you get to some planning and get ready for that trip. As we round the corner here, one quick ask for the audience, for those of you still with us, a good indication that you are enjoying the show. Still on YouTube, if you could like this video. If you're with us on Twitter, like the post where this video lives. In podcast form, if you could take 5 seconds to leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that would be greatly appreciated. And last but not least, however you're listening, you can support this show by supporting Right Angle Sports if you're feeling so inclined. The custom link I've got for that is tinyurl.com/raspicks. And once again, on YouTube and in podcast form, that link is in the show notes. On Twitter, that link is in the profile bio. We'll go ahead and wrap things up now. I want to remind everybody you can follow Drew's work across a bevy of platforms: NBC Sports Bet, the Bet the Edge and Deep Dive podcasts, along with the Matchbook NFL betting show, and on Twitter at whale_capper. And good news, if you really enjoy Drew's work and you're bummed that this conversation is winding down, you can catch him shortly for the halftime live stream on the Deep Dive with his partner in crime, Andy Molitor. So that's coming up soon. Drew, thanks for making time to hop back on the show tonight. Always appreciate the insight, and enjoy Joshua Tree this weekend.
Oh, you bet it, buddy. I'll be out there among the mezzogranite, watching the incredible sunsets, and enjoying some legal beverages. So yeah. That'll be great.
There we go. Can't beat that. And for the rest of those of you having some FOMO already from Drew's weekend plans, I do still appreciate you taking time to watch or listen to this show. In the US, have a happy Veterans Day weekend. And Canada, happy Remembrance Day. And wherever you may be outside of the US or Canada, I hope you all enjoy Week 10 in the NFL, and best of luck with your bets this weekend.